Okay, so we talked about a new form called slope-intercept form. Okay, well, we talked yesterday. You were supposed to talk through the notes with the sub the day before, but I think we've got it all clear. And the title of that form reveals the information that you can just pluck out of that form. So I have a new form for you today that, through the title, is going to reveal two key pieces of information about your graph. Now this is, I think, lesson 4.3. Oops. Go back to black. And we're going to learn about a form called point slope form. Okay. And I'm actually going to start not giving you point slope form, but I'm going to derive point slope form. And it comes from, think about it this way. What else have we talked about sometime in this unit of study that dealt with points and slope? Okay, this isn't about graphing. It's another form that you needed points and you had slope. Pardon me? Not slope-intercept form, because that doesn't give me points and slope. It gives me a y-intercept in particular, which, yes, you could argue that is a point. But this one, we have points and a slope.
Standard form?
Nope, that actually gives me no points. Well, honey, that's what we're talking about, but that's not what we're doing. I'm asking something else. All right. I can't quite glean the great way to get you to say this. Okay, we talked about two ways to figure out slope. One way was when you're looking at a graph, what would you do to figure out the slope? Yeah, you go from one point and you count the rise, and then you count the run till you get to the second point. Okay, but there was a second way of figuring out slope, especially when they didn't give you a graph. How would you figure out slope? What did you need and what did you do? So Liam, you kept doing this, so I'm thinking you might have an idea. What do you think?
Two ordered pairs, and we get the, you put the y2 and minus y1 over x2 minus x1.
So we have two ordered pairs. We're just going to generically call them x1, y1, x2, y2. And we discovered that if we subtract our y's, and it doesn't really matter if I do y1 minus y2 or y2 minus y1, as long as what's in the bottom matches with the y above it. And we came up with what's called the slope formula. Okay? But what if I decided that I wanted to change, and actually I'm going to change this, I'm going to change my little lettering there for a minute, just because it'll help out, oops, down the line. Let's go back to the standard formula where the 2's go in front and the 1's go in the back. You'll see why in a second. So what if I wanted to create an equation using this as my guide? And if you think about slope-intercept form, what was alone on the left of slope-intercept form? Y. So what if I wanted to try to get the y by itself? So what would I have to mathematically do to begin that process with that formula to get the y by itself? What's happening to the y's at this point? What's happening to the y's at this point, Bryce? Yeah, they're getting divided by a difference in x's. Okay, so what's the opposite of dividing by the difference in x's? Yeah, so let's go ahead and we're going to multiply both sides by that difference in x's. Okay, and that would give us x sub 2 minus x sub 1 times m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1. Now, I want to keep in mind what that slope-intercept form looked like, because I kind of want mine to resemble this. So it says y equals mx plus b, okay? So right now, the y's are on the wrong side, the m is behind the x's, so I'm going to do a little symmetric property and a little commutative property and get things looking a little bit better. So I'm going to have y2 minus y sub 1 equals m times the quantity x sub 2 minus x sub 1. But remember that x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2 actually are holding the place of coordinates. But I need to write an equation. And my equation needs to, again, resemble, in a way, that slope-intercept form. And what were the two variables in the slope-intercept form? What are the two variables in the y equals mx plus b? M is not a variable. B is not a variable. X is and y is. Remember, the m and the b are just numbers. Just like in the slope formula, the x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2 are just numbers. Okay? So the only true variables in slope-intercept form is the y and the x. So I want my equation to also have a y and an x. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the first of the two variables, so the first of the y's and the first of the x's, and I'm just going to make them a plain variable. So I'm going to get y minus y sub 1 equals m times the quantity x minus x sub 1. And what we have just come up with is what's called point slope form. Okay. Where's the point? Well, it's the x sub 1, y sub 1. And what's the slope? That's your m. Okay? So it's just a different way of revealing different information. Now, what I love about this form is if I'm being asked to write equations, this form is the starter. I start with this form, and then what I'm going to do is solve it to whatever form I'm required to get my answer in. Okay? So it's super helpful to have this one. All right, so let's talk about how would I write an equation in point-slope form? And I've got two different ways information is going to get handed to me. So I'm going to, everybody good? Can I move? Okay, so I'm going to put it back at the top. Remind ourselves what this new form is that we're going to be practicing. Y minus y sub 1 equals m times the quantity x minus x sub 1. Now, you guys don't necessarily need to write it again because you have it on your paper, but that's okay if you wrote it. So, two scenarios. Scenario 1. Given a point and a slope. So what I want to do is end up my equation looking like point-slope form, given a point and a slope. Now, a couple things to remember. There's parentheses. They stay intact when you write in point-slope form. Okay? So your answer should look just like the form. If you don't have parentheses, then it means one of two things. You've already started solving it, and you've distributed to get rid of the parentheses, or what value of slope could I have so that you wouldn't see parentheses? Exactly. If you have a slope of 1, then you wouldn't see the parentheses, because 1 times anything gives you what you had. So that's, and I have seen that show up, so it's a little tricky that people have to figure out what that slope is. Okay, so let's do an example. Let me give you a point. We'll call the point 3, 7, and let's give you a slope of 4. All right, so here's how the frame works. Always has a y, always has a minus, always has an equal, always has a blank spot for the slope, always has an x, always has a minus. That's the frame. Now, the signs may not remain subtraction. It depends upon the signs of the values that I'm plugging in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and plug in. Y goes in the y spot, or 7 goes in the y spot, 3 goes in the x spot, 4 goes in the m. And that's it. I'm done. There's my answer.
That was easy.
Super easy. Okay?
Just in front of.
That's point slope form. If they're asking for an equation in point slope form, you're done. Let's do one where we have negatives so that you can see how that changes things. So let's do a different point. Let's do -2, -1, and let's have a fraction slope. M equals -3/5. So again, my frame starts off y minus, and then I'm going to put in the y coordinate, equals the slope times the quantity x minus the x coordinate. And then I just start plugging in values. So the y is a -1. The x is a -2. The slope is a -3/5. The only work I'm going to have to do in this scenario, writing in point slope form, is to consolidate my signs down to only one between terms. So what am I going to write between the y and the 1? It's going to be a plus because two negatives make a positive. And then we have -3/5 times the quantity. And then what do I write between the x and the 2? Again, two negatives make a positive. See how I made that smiley face? You guys didn't catch that? I thought that was genius. And you're done. So, worst case scenario, when you're being asked to write an equation in point slope form, and you're given a point and a slope, is you're going to have to contend with double signs. That's it. That's the worst case scenario. Okay? That's one way, and that's one thing that you're going to see in your homework tonight. Now, the second way is, what if they only give you 2 points? So let's go to given 2 points. And they want me to write this equation in point slope form, okay? So let's say we've got the points, I'm going to color these, -3, 2, and 4, -1. Okay, so what is this form called again? Point slope. And I have 2 points. I need slope. How do I figure out slope if I have 2 points? We have a formula. Exactly. We don't add them. We use the formula, which actually tells us to subtract. Okay, so first job we're going to do, find slope. We're not going to graph. We're not going to do rise over run. That takes way too much time. So to do that, we're going to use m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So in our particular case, I'm going to do mine as my fractions. So I got my y over my x for my first order pair. I have my y over my x for my second order pair. And this is some of the Math 8 kids have been struggling with this idea. The formula itself uses subtraction, and it's very important that you don't confuse the sign of the coordinate with subtraction. Okay? They're two separate things. All right, so we're going to have to contend with some double signs and to help out. So here we have subtracting a negative is adding the opposite. And some people are still not recognizing on the bottom when the signs are the same that I add them, that they still end up subtracting them. So if that's what you need to do, add the opposite to make it more clear. Do it. So we get m equals 2 plus 1 is 3. -3 plus -4 is -7. So I'm just going to rewrite that with the negative up at top. Okay? Now, point slope form has a point and a slope. We got the slope. And then it says point, but we have points. So here comes choice. Second step is to pick one point and write in, and I'm going to abbreviate point slope form as P-S form. Guess what this means? How many correct answers are there?
2.
2 correct answers. Give only one. So when I have a test, I accept both forms because both of them are correct. You don't need to give me both of them unless the question specifically says what two equations would be correct in point slope form for this given situation. Okay, then you'd have to give me both. But generally, they just say write an equation, and meaning singular. Okay, so let's do both of them. Let's start with, we'll do the green point. So y minus the y-coordinate equals the slope we just calculated, which was the negative 3/7, times the quantity y minus the y-coordinate. X, yes, thank you. Now, again, at this juncture, the worst thing we have to contend with is double signs, which we have. So this answer, is going to become y minus 2 equals negative 3/7 times the quantity x plus 3. Okay? Second choice, y, let's see what we got here. Y minus the y value, which is a negative 1, equals the negative 3/4, 3/7 times the quantity x minus the x-coordinate, which was 4. So again, the only thing I have to contend with is I've got a double sign, so I'm going to deal with that. Oh my goodness, we get y plus 1, it does sound like Brandon, equals negative 3/7 times the quantity x minus 4. So that answer's a good answer, but I only need to provide one of them in most cases, okay? Now, you are going to be asked to graph, so I want to talk to you briefly about how do you graph in point-slope form, and it's very similar to slope-intercept form. What was the first thing that you need to graph when you're graphing in slope-intercept form? The y-intercept, so hopefully you got that right on the quiz. Jane, don't listen. So that's the same thing here. We need a physical point, okay? So to graph from point slope form, it gets a little tricky, okay? Remember your equation looks like this. And let's say yours looks like this. Y minus 3 equals 2 times the quantity x plus 4. So what I need to do now is identify the signs for my coordinates of my point. Okay? So here's what I look at. According to the form, my x has a negative in front of it. But according to my equation, my x has a positive in front of it. I need the sign of my equation to match the form. So what am I going to need to do to 4 to make it match the form? Say again? Yeah, so not minus negative 4. What I need to do is just change the sign on the 4. Oh, come and play. Come on, my friend. You can come. Oh, come on. There it is. Thank you, boy. That needs to match. Okay? So that says my x is going to be negative 4. Here, they are the same. So guess what that says? 3 is good. 3 is it. That's the hardest part to this. Now, there's other option that you could do, and the other option would be to take each one of the quantities that involve a variable, set it equal to 0, and solve. That verifies that your y should be positive 3 and that your x should be negative 4. So you have 2 ways to think about this, okay? It's real fast. It's like basically you're figuring out the x-intercept and the y-intercept real quickly, okay? So we've got our point, and what's our slope? Yeah, it's 2. Now, because I'm graphing remember the notes from slope-intercept form? What do we have to do to our slope in order to use it to graph? Remember, Liam? Yeah, we need to make it a fraction because we need a rise number and we need a run number. Okay. Now remember, slope is not a coordinate. Slope is directions to a point. Okay. So I'm going to pull out some graph paper. And let's see, we need to go, let's see, -4 on the x-axis, +3, and then rising up. So we're going to be low on, we don't need to have negatives on the y-axis. So again, I'm kind of catering my graph to what's here. So tick marks on the lines of the graph paper. Make sure you're labeling every other tick mark. Make sure you've got arrow caps at the end of your axes. Make sure you labeled x-axis on the right, y-axis at the top. And then we're going to graph. So we start with the point. And the point says go to -4 from the origin on the x-axis and then up to 3 on the y-axis. And that is your point. From there, we're going to play the role of slope. So slope says you're going to rise up 2 and then run 1 to the right. So we're going to rise up 2 and 1 to the right, which takes us to the point -3, 5. And then we just connect them up. Okay? And then you have a line. So the hardest part to this is making sure your signs are right. You've got 2 options how to make sure you get the right signs on your coordinates. Okay? And I've got 2 more things I want to talk to you about. One you're not going to use on your homework tonight. Okay? One you're not going to use tonight, but you will Monday. Everybody good here? All right. So sometimes what I had mentioned before is that your equation, they ask you to write it in slope-intercept form, but the information they give you is a point and a slope. You cannot take that information and plug it into y equals mx plus b, because the only thing you can plug in for the b is the y-intercept, and if they don't give you the y-intercept, you can't do it. So if you think about the homework you've had, they've given you the y-intercept, and you just plug, done, okay? So what you're going to do if you're given a point and a slope, or you're given 2 points, you start with point-slope form, okay? So what I'm going to do is show you how to go from point-slope form to slope-intercept form, from point-slope form into standard form. So point-slope to slope-intercept. And all you're going to do is solve the equation to make it look like the slope-intercept form. Okay, so remember what your goal is here. You want it to look like y equals mx plus b. So let's cut to the chase. I'm going to give you a point-slope equation, and then we're going to go ahead and get it to look like y equals mx plus b. So the equation that we're going to start with is this one. Y minus 4 equals 7 times the quantity x plus 3. All right, so what do you think is going to be my first step to solve so it looks like slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b? Patrick.
Maybe distribute 7.
Okay, not even maybe. We're going to distribute. We need to get rid of the parentheses because there are no parentheses in slope-intercept form. So we get y equals, or y minus 7, y minus 4 equals 7 times x is 7x, 7 times 3 is 21. Now what? Pardon me?
Add 4 to 21.
Yeah. We're going to, let's see, I'll write it out in words. Add / subtract, depends on what the sign tells you to do. The constant to the right. So we want to get that constant to go whoop over to the right because we want it to be completely y by itself. So the opposite of subtracting 4 is adding 4. So I line it up with its partner. And I get y equals 7x plus 25. Done. That's it. Okay? 2 simple steps to go from point slope to slope intercept. Okay? Let's take that same equation, but let's go to standard form. And remember what standard form looks like. ax plus by equals c. So I'm going to start us off from the beginning, and we're going to follow a very similar path to what we did before. There are multiple ways to get to the answer. First, though, we do need to distribute. There is no getting away from that. Okay, at this juncture, what do I know has to be true for slope-intercept form?
It's 25 not 21.
No, 7 times 3 is 21? Oh, no, here I did 21 plus 4 and the one before. That's where the 25 came from. But down here, we're still at y minus 4 equals 7x plus 21. Okay, so what does standard form tell me I have to have in my equation?
X and Y.
Give me more about x and y. What about x and y?
X has to be in front of Y.
Okay, so I need x and y together, and x has to be in front. So let's start with that. So let's go ahead and subtract 7x from both sides, and that gives me negative 7x plus y plus 4 equals 21. Okay, now what?
But isn't it minus?
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. Now what?
Add 4.
Again, constant has to be on the right, so we're going to do that by adding 4 to both sides. That's going to take me to here. Negative 7x plus y equals 25. By the way, I can do those two steps at the same time, right? Because what I do with the x's and what I do with the constants are not going to blend with each other, so I can do them at the same time. All right, now does this meet the criteria for standard form?
No.
No, what's wrong?
This is negative.
Yeah, our a is negative. So we have two choices, multiply or divide by negative 1. I tend to just use division myself. And by the way, it's a 1, not just a negative sign. Okay, this actually has to be a number attached to it when you're doing it. So then you end up with 7x minus y equals negative 25. There's no way to take your point slope form and plug numbers in and to standard form. Standard form, you have to solve for, okay? All right, have fun with your homework.